There is something very ordinary sitting in many homes right now. It's in kitchen drawers, bathroom cabinets, bedside tables. People keep it close because it helps with pain, stiffness, headaches, and everyday aches. And yet, very few people truly stop and think about how often they use it, or what long-term use might mean for the body over time. I want to speak about this calmly and honestly because this is not about fear. It is about awareness, especially for those of us over 50 who may take pain relief more regularly than we realize. Today we are talking about ibuprofen. In some countries, you might know it as Advil or other similar brands. Many people reach for it without hesitation. A sore knee, a backache, joint stiffness, a dental issue. It feels like a simple and practical solution, and in many situations, it absolutely can be helpful when used appropriately. But here is the important part that is often overlooked. How something works in the body also explains why it should be used thoughtfully, especially over longer periods. I've noticed that when people talk about ibuprofen, they often say the same thing. It's just a basic painkiller. That sentence sounds harmless, but it also reveals how easily we assume that anything available without a prescription must be completely risk-free. It sits on store shelves next to vitamins and antacids. You don't need a long consultation to get it. You can buy it quickly, quietly, and use it whenever discomfort appears. Millions of people use it every single week, sometimes daily, without giving it much thought. And yet, this small tablet interacts with several important systems in the body, including the stomach, kidneys, blood pressure regulation, and overall balance of internal processes. Now, I want to be very clear from the beginning. I am not saying that ibuprofen is bad or that everyone should avoid it completely. That would not be balanced or helpful. When used occasionally for short-term discomfort, it can be a very useful tool. Many people find relief after an injury, after dental procedures, or during temporary inflammation. In fact, in some cases, it may be a more suitable option than stronger medications. The key difference is not occasional use. The key difference is regular, long-term use. And this is where many people, especially older adults managing chronic aches or joint stiffness, may unintentionally move into a pattern of daily or frequent use without realizing the cumulative effect. Before we talk about why that matters, it helps to understand in simple terms how ibuprofen actually works inside the body. Most people know that it reduces pain, but very few know how it does that. Ibuprofen belongs to a group of medications often used to reduce pain, inflammation, and fever. It works by blocking certain natural processes in the body that produce substances involved in pain and inflammation. These substances are often described as messengers that increase sensitivity to pain and signal inflammation in tissues. When their production is reduced, pain signals become less intense, and swelling may decrease. That is why ibuprofen can feel effective and fast-acting. However, those same substances also play protective roles in the body. They help protect the stomach lining from acid. They help maintain healthy blood flow to the kidneys. They support normal circulation and vascular balance. So when their activity is reduced, the body experiences a trade-off. Pain relief improves, but some protective mechanisms may also be reduced at the same time. This does not usually cause noticeable issues with short-term use. The body is resilient and can adapt. But with frequent or long-term use, the balance can gradually shift. And that shift is what people rarely consider. Now let's talk about why people continue to use ibuprofen so commonly, and understandably so. Life brings physical discomfort. Joint stiffness, muscle soreness, lingering aches, and inflammation become more common as we age. Many people want to stay active, independent, and mobile. A simple tablet that reduces discomfort can feel like a small but valuable support. And in the short term, that approach can make sense. If someone uses it for a few days after physical strain, minor injury, or temporary inflammation, it often serves its purpose well. The problem usually does not come from occasional use. The concern begins when use becomes routine. Taking it daily for weeks, months, or even years because of ongoing discomfort is a completely different situation from occasional use after an acute issue. This is where the body may start responding differently. One of the first areas that deserves attention is the stomach. You may have heard people say that ibuprofen can irritate the stomach. But the internal process is more complex than simple irritation. The stomach naturally produces strong acid to help digest food. At the same time, the body maintains a protective lining that shields the stomach wall from that acid. Certain natural compounds help preserve that protective barrier. When ibuprofen is used frequently, the production of those protective compounds can decrease. Over time, the stomach lining may become more vulnerable to acid exposure. This can begin quietly, without obvious symptoms. Some people may only notice mild discomfort or occasional indigestion. Others may not feel anything at all for a long time, but internally, the protective balance may already be reduced. This is especially important for individuals over 60, those taking blood-thinning medications, or those who already have a sensitive digestive system. Another area that deserves careful attention is the kidneys. The kidneys work continuously, filtering large amounts of blood every day and maintaining fluid and electrolyte balance. To do this efficiently, they rely on steady and well-regulated blood flow. Natural protective processes help maintain that circulation, especially during dehydration, illness, or physical stress. When ibuprofen is used frequently, these regulatory processes can be affected. In certain situations, such as dehydration, use of specific medications, or older age, this may place additional strain on the kidneys. In the short term, many people feel no symptoms at all. That is what makes this topic so important. The body does not always send strong warning signals immediately. However, over time, repeated strain may gradually affect how efficiently the kidneys function, particularly in individuals who already take medications for blood pressure or fluid balance. And this brings us to another often overlooked point: blood pressure. Many people do not realize that regular use of certain pain relievers may influence fluid balance and vascular tension in the body. This can contribute to subtle increases in blood pressure over time. For someone who already monitors their blood pressure, this interaction becomes especially relevant. Imagine taking medication to help maintain healthy blood pressure, while also regularly using a pain reliever that gently pushes it in the opposite direction. Without realizing it, a person may feel confused about why their readings become less stable. This does not happen to everyone, but it is an important factor to be aware of, particularly for older adults who are already managing cardiovascular health. Now, there is another perspective that is rarely discussed, especially when we talk about long-term well-being and healthy aging. Many people assume that if a tablet reduces inflammation and discomfort, then using it regularly must be supporting the body. But the reality is more nuanced. Discomfort is often a signal. It is the body's way of asking for attention. Rest, movement adjustments, posture changes, hydration, or deeper care. When we regularly silence that signal without addressing the root cause, we may feel temporary relief, but the underlying issue often remains. Ibuprofen can reduce pain signals and lower inflammatory markers temporarily, but it does not solve the original source of joint strain, muscle imbalance, or chronic tension. For older adults who value independence and mobility, this distinction is extremely important. There is also emerging discussion in the research world about how frequent use of anti-inflammatory medications may influence the body's natural adaptation processes. For example, when muscles experience resistance training or physical activity, the body responds by adapting and strengthening over time. Some evidence suggests that excessive suppression of inflammation signals may reduce the efficiency of this natural adaptation, especially in older individuals who rely on movement to maintain strength and balance. This does not mean occasional use is a problem. It simply highlights that daily reliance over long periods may not always support long-term resilience in the way people expect. Another layer that receives far less attention involves the digestive system beyond the stomach. Most conversations focus only on stomach discomfort. but the small intestine also plays a critical role in nutrient absorption, immune balance, and overall gut health. Frequent use of certain pain relievers may influence the integrity of the intestinal lining over time. When the lining becomes more sensitive, the barrier between the digestive tract and bloodstream may become less selective. This process can happen quietly. A person may feel completely normal on the surface while internal changes develop slowly. There may be no obvious warning signs in the early stages. That is why awareness is so valuable, particularly for those who take pain relief regularly for chronic aches. Gut health influences many aspects of daily life: energy levels, immune balance, mood stability, and metabolic function. When the digestive environment is disrupted over long periods, the effects may extend far beyond digestion itself. Now let's talk about who should be especially mindful. Age plays a significant role. After the age of 60, the body naturally becomes more sensitive to medications, even those that have been used safely for many years. Kidney function, stomach protection, and cardiovascular balance all change gradually with age. This does not mean fragility. It simply means that the margin for long-term stress becomes smaller. If someone already manages blood pressure, takes medications for heart health, or uses diuretics, the interaction with regular ibuprofen use becomes more important to consider. There is also the factor of hydration. Many older adults do not drink as much water as their bodies truly need, especially during colder months when thirst signals feel weaker. Mild dehydration, combined with frequent use of pain relief, may place additional stress on internal systems without obvious symptoms. Even active individuals should be thoughtful. Some people take pain relievers before long walks, exercise sessions, or physical activity, believing it will prevent discomfort. But during prolonged activity, the body is already under physiological stress, and fluid balance may shift. Adding regular medication use on top of that may not always produce the protective effect people expect. Again, this is not about fear, it is about informed, balanced use. Another important point that often surprises people is how cumulative small decisions can influence long-term health. It is rarely a single tablet taken once that creates concern. The body is designed to handle occasional interventions very well. What matters more is the pattern: weeks, months, or years of consistent use without reassessment. Many individuals begin using ibuprofen for a specific reason: knee discomfort, back stiffness, joint aches, or recurring headaches. Over time, it quietly becomes part of the daily routine. One tablet here, another there. Eventually, it feels completely normal. And because it is familiar and accessible, the habit continues without a second thought. But long-term habits, even with common medications, deserve periodic reflection. There is also an emotional element to consider. Pain relief provides immediate comfort. That comfort can create psychological reassurance, making people feel more capable and secure in their daily activities. While that feeling is understandable, it can also mask the body's natural feedback system. Instead of asking, "Why does this discomfort keep returning?" many people simply continue managing the sensation itself. From a longevity perspective, this matters. Healthy aging is not only about reducing discomfort in the moment, it is about preserving organ function, maintaining mobility, supporting digestion, and protecting cardiovascular stability over decades, not just days. And this is where thoughtful, moderate use becomes more aligned with long-term well-being than automatic routine use. Another subtle point involves the microbiome, the complex ecosystem of beneficial bacteria in the gut. Scientific interest in the microbiome has grown significantly in recent years because of its influence on immunity, metabolism, and even cognitive health. Some findings suggest that long-term medication patterns, including frequent anti-inflammatory use, may influence microbiome diversity over time. For older adults who prioritize vitality, digestion, and immune balance, this is a meaningful consideration, even if the changes happen gradually and silently. Perhaps the most important message so far is this. Occasional use is very different from habitual use. Short-term relief is very different from long-term reliance, and many people never pause to make that distinction. This does not happen to everyone, but it is an important factor to be aware of, particularly for older adults who are already managing cardiovascular health. Now, after hearing all of this, it would be easy to misunderstand the message and think that ibuprofen should never be used at all. But that would not be balanced, and it would not be helpful. The real message is much more practical and much calmer. Ibuprofen is a tool, and like any tool, its impact depends on how, when, and how often it is used. Taking it occasionally for short-term discomfort after a minor injury, temporary inflammation, or a specific short recovery period is generally very different from using it every single day for ongoing aches and stiffness. This distinction is where awareness becomes powerful. There is a significant difference between using it for a few days because of a temporary issue and quietly relying on it for weeks or months because discomfort has become part of daily life. Many people do not even realize when that shift happens. At first, it is just for a few days. Then it becomes just during the week. Then eventually, it turns into a regular habit. And habits, especially small daily ones, can shape long-term health more than occasional decisions. If someone finds that they need pain relief beyond a short period, that is usually a signal worth paying attention to. Not a signal to panic, but a signal to pause and reassess. The body is often communicating something deeper: joint overload, posture strain, inflammation from lifestyle factors, or insufficient recovery. Addressing the root cause is often more supportive for long-term well-being than continuously masking the signal. Another important consideration is risk accumulation over time. With short-term use, the body typically manages the effects without noticeable disruption. But with frequent long-term use, even mild physiological changes may slowly add up. Subtle increases in blood pressure, gradual digestive sensitivity, or additional strain on internal systems may not be obvious day to day. And that is exactly why many people are surprised when health issues appear seemingly out of nowhere. In reality, it is often the result of repeated small choices over a long period, rather than a single moment. For adults over 50, this awareness becomes even more valuable. The body becomes wiser, but also more sensitive to long-term patterns. Kidney function, cardiovascular balance, and digestive protection all deserve more thoughtful care than they did decades earlier. If someone is already taking medications for blood pressure, heart health, or fluid balance, it becomes especially important to be mindful about regular painkiller use and how these elements may interact over time. Hydration, nutrition, movement, and rest also play a major role. Sometimes, improving these foundational habits can naturally reduce the need for frequent pain relief. Gentle strength training, proper stretching, ergonomic adjustments, and anti-inflammatory nutrition patterns may support the body in a more sustainable way. Of course, every individual situation is different. Some people genuinely require anti-inflammatory support for specific medical conditions, and in those cases, guided and monitored use may be appropriate. That is why open conversations with a healthcare professional become especially important when use becomes regular rather than occasional. Another practical step many professionals recommend in long-term use situations is protective strategies for the digestive system. In some cases, stomach protective approaches may be considered to reduce irritation risks. However, it is important to understand that this does not remove all other potential effects on blood pressure, kidneys, or overall physiological balance. So the goal is not simply protection, the goal is thoughtful use. One of the most overlooked truths is this: accessibility does not always equal harmlessness. Just because something is widely available, familiar, and commonly used does not mean it should be taken indefinitely without reflection. Many everyday medications are safe when used correctly, but still require awareness when used frequently over long periods. And this applies not only to ibuprofen, but to all forms of regular medication use. The most important takeaway is surprisingly simple. If you use ibuprofen occasionally for short-term discomfort, it can be a helpful and reasonable option. If you feel the need to use it regularly for weeks or months, that is the moment to step back and reassess rather than automatically continuing the pattern. Not out of fear, but out of respect for your body's long-term balance. Because in many real-life situations, people do not experience problems from one or two tablets. Instead, challenges tend to develop after long periods of repeated, routine use that felt harmless at the time. And when people finally reflect on their habits, they often say the same quiet sentence: "I thought it was completely safe because it was so common." That is why awareness matters more than alarm. Understanding how a medication works, how often you use it, and how your body responds over time is one of the most responsible steps you can take for healthy aging. Ibuprofen is not something to fear, it is something to use wisely. And sometimes, the most powerful health decision is not eliminating a tool, but simply using it more consciously, more occasionally, and with greater awareness of the signals your body is already giving you. Occasional use is very different from habitual use. Short-term relief is very different from long-term reliance, and many people never pause to make that distinction. This does not happen to everyone, but it is an important factor to be aware of, particularly for older adults who are already managing cardiovascular health.